My name is Anna. I live in a small town in the countryside. I've always wanted to speak English. But every time I try, I forget the words. I study hard, but it feels like my brain is always on pause when I need to speak. I've been learning English for years. I watch English movies, read English books, and listen to English songs. I write the words I learn in my notebook. But speaking? That's always been a problem. When I was younger, I thought that once I knew the words, speaking would be easy. But it wasn't. Every time I tried to speak, I felt my stomach twist in nervousness. The words just didn't come out. Last week, something happened. I was walking in the park when I saw a man standing by a bench. He was looking at a map, looking confused. I thought he might need help. So, I decided to speak to him. I walked over to him and smiled. "Can I help you?" I asked. The man looked up from his map and said, "Excuse me, where is the train station?" I knew the answer. I had passed the train station many times. I could give directions easily. The station was just a few blocks away. But when I opened my mouth, nothing came out. I froze. I pointed in the direction of the station, but I couldn't say anything. My mind was completely blank. The man looked at me with confusion. "Just that way," I finally said, pointing down the road. He smiled, thanked me, and walked away. But I felt horrible. I couldn't even give simple directions. When I got home, I sat at my desk, feeling frustrated. I had learned so many words, yet I couldn't speak when I needed to. Why does this always happen to me? I asked myself. I decided to find a solution. I couldn't let this problem continue. I had to speak English. But where should I start? I thought about it for a while. And then it hit me, I needed to practice the basics. The phrases I already knew. The next day, I started with simple phrases. How are you? Where are you from? What's your name? I wrote them down and repeated them to myself. I wanted to make sure I would remember these phrases. I kept saying them over and over, hoping that they would stay in my mind. But I knew I needed to practice speaking more. I decided to practice at the supermarket. When I saw a woman looking at apples, I thought it would be a good chance to try speaking English again. I walked up to her and said, "Excuse me, can I ask you a question?" She looked up and smiled. "Of course," she said. I asked, "What kind of apples do you like?" I felt nervous, but I pushed myself to speak. She answered that she liked red apples. I nodded, trying to say, "I like them too." But then I couldn't remember the word for sweet. I wanted to say, "These apples are sweet," but the word just didn't come to my mind. I felt embarrassed. I said, "They are very good," but I didn't feel confident. She smiled kindly and said, "Yes, they are." I walked away, feeling a bit better. I had spoken in English, even though I made a mistake. But I still wished I could remember all the words. That evening, I called my friend Lucy. She is from Canada and speaks perfect English. "Lucy, I always forget words when I speak English. What should I do?" I asked. Lucy laughed. "It's okay, Anna. It happens to everyone. The most important thing is to keep speaking. Don't worry about making mistakes." "I'm afraid I'll say something wrong," I said. "What if I make a mistake?" Lucy smiled. "Everyone makes mistakes. It's normal. The more you speak, the more confident you'll become. So, don't be afraid." That made sense. I decided to try again the next day. I went to a cafe to practice speaking with someone. I saw a man sitting alone at a table, reading a newspaper. I took a deep breath and walked up to him. "Excuse me," I said, "can I talk to you for a few minutes?" He looked up from his newspaper and smiled. "Sure, go ahead," he said. "I'm learning English," I said. "Can I practice with you?" My heart was racing, but I was determined to keep going. We talked for about 10 minutes. I made a lot of mistakes, but I didn't care. I asked him questions, and he answered them. Sometimes I didn't understand everything, but that was okay. After the conversation, I felt proud. I had spoken English. It wasn't perfect, but I had done it. And that's what mattered. The next day, I went to the park. I saw a woman sitting on a bench, reading a book. I thought about talking to her. I sat down next to her. "Excuse me," I said, "what book are you reading?" She looked up and smiled. It's a book about history, she said. Do you like history? I nodded. Yes, I like it a lot. I enjoy learning about the past, I said. We talked for about 10 minutes. I was nervous at first, but as the conversation went on, I felt more comfortable. I realized that every time I spoke, I felt a little braver. I made mistakes, but it was okay. I was improving. Later that evening, I thought about how many times I had been afraid to speak English. I had missed so many chances to practice because I was scared of making mistakes. But now, I understood. The only way to get better was to keep speaking, even if I made mistakes. I couldn't be afraid anymore. The next week, I decided to challenge myself. I went to a new cafe in town. I wanted to speak to someone new, to get out of my comfort zone. There was a barista behind the counter, and she seemed friendly. I took a deep breath and walked up to her. Hi, I'm learning English, I said. Can I practice with you? She smiled and said, Of course. What do you want to talk about? We talked for about 15 minutes. I asked her questions about the cafe, and she told me about her job. I felt nervous, but I also felt proud of myself. I could see that I was improving. My speaking wasn't perfect, but it was better than before. And I was no longer afraid to make mistakes. I kept practicing every day. Sometimes I practiced with my family. Other times, I spoke to strangers in the park or at the store. I even started recording myself speaking and listening to it later. A few weeks later, I ran into the man from the park again. This time, I didn't freeze. I spoke confidently and even made a few jokes. The conversation felt natural. I felt a huge sense of accomplishment. I wasn't afraid to speak English anymore. I was learning, and I was getting better every day. One day, I went back to the supermarket. I saw the woman who I had spoken to about apples before. She was picking out some fruit again. I smiled and walked up to her. Hi, how are you? I said. She looked up and smiled back. Hello. I'm good, thank you. How about you? We talked for a few minutes. I didn't worry about mistakes. I just spoke. It felt so good to have a conversation in English without fear. Later that evening, I felt so happy. I realized how far I had come. I had been afraid to speak for so long, but now I was speaking every day. I called Lucy again. "Lucy, you won't believe what happened today." I spoke to the woman in the supermarket again, and it felt amazing. I didn't worry about making mistakes at all. Lucy laughed. "I'm so proud of you, Anna. You've come such a long way. Keep practicing and keep speaking. You're doing great." I felt more motivated than ever. Speaking English had become easier for me. I wasn't afraid anymore. But I knew I still had a lot to learn. I started to practice speaking every day. Sometimes I went to the park and spoke to strangers. Other times, I recorded myself and listened carefully to my pronunciation. One day, I went to a language exchange group. There were people from different countries, all learning English. I felt nervous at first, but I decided to give it a try. The people there were so friendly. They were also learning English, so they understood how I felt. We all made mistakes, but we laughed and helped each other. After that meeting, I felt so proud of myself. Speaking to a group of people in English was something I had never imagined I could do. But now, I was doing it. The more I practiced, the more confident I became. I still made mistakes, but I didn't care. I knew that mistakes were part of learning. One afternoon, I had a conversation with a tourist at the park. She was lost and needed directions. I helped her, and we talked for about 20 minutes. At the end of our conversation, she smiled and thanked me. I realized that I had spoken to her in English for almost half an hour without thinking twice about it. I couldn't believe how much my English had improved. I had gone from freezing in front of people to having long conversations with strangers. I felt like I had finally found my voice in English. But even with all my progress, I knew there was still room for improvement. I wanted to speak more fluently, without pausing to search for words. I started to think about the things I still struggled with. Sometimes I couldn't find the right word. Other times, I felt like I was speaking too slowly. But I didn't let it stop me. I decided to focus on small conversations every day. I would speak to people in the cafe, at the supermarket, or even on the bus. It didn't matter if I made mistakes. I just kept speaking. One day, I went to a restaurant by myself. I sat at a table, and the waiter came to take my order. "Hello. How can I help you today?" he asked. I smiled and said, "I'd like a coffee, please. And a sandwich." It was a simple sentence, but I felt so proud of myself for speaking without hesitation. The waiter smiled back and asked, "Would you like anything else?" I nodded and said, "No, thank you." As I sat there, enjoying my coffee, I realized something important. I had stopped being afraid of speaking English. I had stopped worrying about making mistakes. Speaking had become natural to me. It didn't matter if I forgot a word or made a small error. I could still have a conversation and enjoy the moment. A few months later, I traveled to London. I was so excited to be in an English-speaking country. I wanted to practice speaking as much as possible. I walked around the city, speaking to people whenever I had the chance. I asked for directions, ordered food in restaurants, and even chatted with other tourists. I felt like a different person. I wasn't the shy Anna who was afraid to speak anymore. I was confident, and I spoke English without hesitation. At the end of my trip, I felt incredibly proud. I had spoken English with strangers, explored a new city, and learned so much along the way. On the flight back home, I reflected on my journey. It hadn't been easy, but every mistake, every struggle, had brought me closer to my goal. I had learned not to be afraid of making mistakes. I learned that speaking English is not about being perfect. It's about being confident enough to try, even when you're not sure you'll get it right. When I returned to my town, I continued practicing. I kept speaking to people in English whenever I could. It felt amazing to see how far I had come. I also started helping other people who were learning English. I met a few beginners who were afraid to speak, just like I had been. I encouraged them to keep going, just as Lucy had encouraged me. It felt good to be able to share my experience and help others. I knew exactly how they felt, and I wanted to show them that speaking English was possible, no matter how many mistakes they made. Over time, my confidence grew even more. I started to think in English. I could have conversations without translating from my native language first. I even started watching movies without subtitles. At first, it was difficult, but soon I could understand more and more. The words I had learned over the years finally came together. Sometimes I still made mistakes, but now I could laugh about them. I knew that mistakes were part of the process. They weren't something to fear, but something to learn from. One day, I was talking to my friend Lucy. "I've come so far," I said. "I can speak English without freezing now. I still make mistakes, but I'm not afraid anymore." Lucy smiled. "I'm so proud of you, Anna. You've worked so hard, and look at how far you've come." I smiled too. I had worked hard, but the journey wasn't over. I was still learning. Every day was an opportunity to get better. I realized that learning a language wasn't about reaching a perfect level. It was about growing, improving, and never giving up. I still had dreams of speaking even more fluently, and I would keep working toward them. A few months later, I met someone new at a language exchange event. We spoke in English, and after our conversation, they said, "Your English is really good." I smiled and said, "Thank you. I've been learning for a long time. And I still make mistakes, but I don't let that stop me." I felt proud. I realized that I wasn't just learning English for myself. I was becoming a part of a global community, connected by language. Now, whenever I speak English, I do so with confidence. I don't worry about mistakes. I focus on communicating and enjoying the conversation. I remember the first time I tried to speak English. I was so afraid of making mistakes. But now, I realize that every mistake has brought me closer to where I am today. I've learned that learning a language is a journey. It's not about being perfect. It's about trying, practicing, and never giving up. Every time I speak English now, I feel a sense of accomplishment. I know I can always get better, but for now, I'm proud of how far I've come. I look forward to the future, to all the new conversations I'll have in English. I know there will be more mistakes along the way, but I'm not afraid anymore. Speaking English has changed my life. It has opened doors to new experiences, new friendships, and new opportunities. And the best part? I'm no longer lost for words. I can speak, and that's all that matters. I've learned that language is not just about words. It's about connecting with others, sharing stories, and building relationships. As I continue my English journey, I know that I will keep growing. And I hope to inspire others who feel lost for words, just as I once did. Because speaking a new language is not easy, but it is worth it. And the best part is, every day is a new opportunity to learn, speak, and grow. So, to everyone who feels like they'll never speak fluently, don't give up. Keep trying. Speak as much as you can. And remember, you are never alone on this journey. I've come a long way, but the journey is not over. I'm still learning. And I always will. Because learning English, or any language, is a lifelong adventure.